Good morning, students. Today I am going to discuss about remaining part of the Dear Departed lesson. Okay, page number 65 in your textbook. All of you open your textbook. Okay, in the last class I had given introduction of the characters of this story, the Dear Departed. So even we had gone through some part of the story where we are actually here. Mrs. Latter, Henry, Ben, Elizabeth, Victoria. These are the characters' name. So Mrs. Latter, she is head of the family. So Mrs. Latter and Henry both are wife and husband, and Victoria, she is daughter to Mrs. Latter and Henry. Here Elizabeth. So Mrs. Latter's sister's name is Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's husband's name is Ben. Okay, so it's a conversation between these characters. Okay. So here, let me read it out. Mrs. Latter. Well, he must have gone round to the ring of bells afterwards. For he came in as merry as a sandboy. I says, we are only waiting for Henry to start dinner. She was saying, we are waiting for Henry to start our dinner. Dinner, he says. I don't want no dinner. So he was saying, I don't want no dinner. I'm going to bed. Okay. Now Ben, shaking his head. Ah, dear, dear. Henry. So here Ben, look at here. Ben was saying, ah, dear, dear. Henry. And when I came in, I found him undressed, sure enough, and snug in bed. Okay. Next, Mrs. Jordan. Yes. He would had a warning. Okay? I'm sure of that. Did he know you? Mrs. Jordan. Let me read it out. Henry, yes. He spoke to me. Henry was saying, he spoke to me. Mrs. Jordan. Did he see he would had a warning? Henry, no, he said. Henry, would you mind taking my boots off? I forgot before I got into bed. Okay, Henry was talking about his boots. Mrs. Jordan, he must have been wandering. Mrs. Jordan was saying, he must have been wandering. Henry, no, he would got. Am on all right. Mrs. Latter, and when we would finish dinner, I thought I would take up a bit of something in a tray. He was lying there for all the world as if he was asleep. So I put the tray down in the bureau. On the chest of drawers, that's a drawing table, and went to waken him. He was quite cold. Look at here. Actually, they were talking about the grandfather, grandpapa. So Mrs. Latter was saying that Look at here. Let me read it out. Then we are going to understand clearly. Henry. Then I heard Amelia calling for me, and I ran upstairs. Henry was saying, yes, Amelia was calling me, so I ran upstairs. Mrs. Slater. Of course, we could do nothing. Mrs. Slater was saying, yes, we could do nothing. Mrs. Jordan. He was gone. Henry. There was not any doubt. Henry was saying, there was not any doubt. Mrs. Jordan. I always knew he would go sudden in the end. Mrs. Jordan was saying that. Mrs. Slater. Well, will you go up and look at him now, or shall we have tea? Mrs. Slater. So they were saying that. Mrs. Slater was saying, okay, well, will you go up and look at him now? Mrs. Slater was saying, okay. Next, Mr. Jordan. What do you say, Ben? Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth, she was asking her husband. Then Ben was saying, I'm not particular. He was saying, I'm not particular. Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth, so she was saying, well, then, if the kettle's nearly ready, we may as well have tea first. She was saying, okay, let's have a tea first. Okay. Mrs. Slater, actually, look at here, puts the kettle or kettle, okay, on the fire and gets tea ready. Sure. She prepared tea. Okay, after having tea, they wanna go upstairs to see about that grandfather, grandpapa in that house. That is that Elizabeth and Mrs. Slater's father. Mrs. Jordan, I was thinking of that. What would you put? Mrs. Slater, at the residence of his daughter, 235 Upper Cornbank Street, etc. Henry, you would not care for a bit of poetry. Okay? Okay, look at the conversations. Mrs. Jordan, I like never forgotten. It's refined. Mrs. Jordan, she was saying that I like never forgotten. It's refined. Next, Henry, yes, but it's rather soon for that. Now, Ben, you could not very well have forgot him the day after. Mrs. Slater, I always fancy a loving husband, a kind father, and a faithful friend. Okay, she was saying about her husband. I always fancy a loving husband, a kind father, and a faithful friend. Okay? Ben, doubtfully, do you think that's right? Henry, I don't think it matters whether it's right or not. Henry was saying, I don't think it matters whether it's right or not. Mrs. Jordan. No, it's more for the look of the thing. Henry. I saw a verse in the evening news yesterday. Henry was saying that he had heard some news yesterday. Proper poetry it was. They were talking about poetry. It rhymed. Despised and forgotten by some you may be. But the spot that contains you is sacred to we. Next, Mrs. Jordan. That's never true. You don't say sacred to we. Henry, it's in the paper. So they were talking about the poetry. So it rhymed. So it rhymed. Something they are talking about that poet. Then Mrs. Jordan. That will never do. Sacred to be. You don't say. Mrs. Jordan was saying to Henry, don't say in that way. Henry, it's in the paper. Henry was saying, it's in the paper. Okay? Mrs. Slater, you would not say it if you were speaking properly, but it's different in poetry. Mrs. Slater was saying, you would not say it if you were speaking properly. But it's different in poetry. In poetry, it's somewhat different, she was saying. Then Henry was saying, poetic license, you know? He was asking his wife, do you know the poetic license? Mrs. Jordan, no, that will never do. We want a verse that says how much we loved him and refers to all his good qualities and says what a heavy loss we have had. So Mrs. Jordan was saying about that poem. About that poet. Okay, about that poem. Next, Mrs. Latcher. You want a whole poem? That's cost a good lot. So Mrs. Latcher was saying, do you want a whole poem? Mrs. Jordan, that is, she was talking to her sister, do you wanna? Well, we will think about it after tea. So, till now, actually they were discussing about the poem, that is about the poetry, poem, what's the story, what's the poem in that. So Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth, she was saying to her sister, after tea, we'll think about it after tea. And then we will look through his bits of things and make a list of them. There is all the furniture in his room. Okay, and she was saying that after tea, we will look through his bits of things and make a list of them. There is all the furniture in his room. So actually, while drinking tea, they had a discussion about poem. So that completed the poem story, that is poem topic. Now they were discussing that, okay, after having this tea, we will go upstairs to have the whatever things they want to see in that room. So they were talking about that room, then that their father's room. Henry, there is no jewelry or valuables of that sort. He was saying, Henry, no jewelry, no valuables. So Henry was saying, no jewelry, no valuables in that room. Mrs. Jordan, except his gold watch. He promised that to our Jimmy. Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth, was saying to Henry, except his gold watch. Actually, in that room, gold watch is there, it seems. She was saying to Henry and Mrs. Latter that her father promised that to our Jimmy. She was saying that father wanna give that gold watch to my Jimmy. So, having cup of tea, they are discussing all these matters. Mrs. Latter, promised your Jimmy? I never heard of that. She was saying, Mrs. Latter. So, Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth's sister, Mrs. Latter, she was saying, I never heard of that. So, she was saying that about this gold watch. I never heard about this promise of this gold watch to Jimmy. Mrs. Jordan, oh, but he did, Emilia. When he was living with us, he was very fond of Jimmy. Mrs. Jordan was saying, when he was living with us, he informed us. Mrs. Latter, well, she amazed. I don't know. She was saying, I don't know about this gold watch promise topic. Ben. Anyhow, there is his insurance money. Have you got the receipt for the premium he paid this morning? So now Ben was talking. He was saying about that insurance money. Actually, have you got the receipt for the premium he paid this morning? This morning, actually, Mrs. Latter said to Elizabeth and Ben that her father had gone out to have a premium. So they were talking about that receipt of that premium. Mrs. Latter, I have not seen it. Mrs. Latter was saying, no, I have not seen it. Victoria jumps up from the sofa and comes behind the table. Victoria, Mother, I don't think Grandpa went to pay his insurance this morning, Victoria was saying. Actually, she jumps up from the sofa and comes behind the table because we're talking over there. So she came and she was saying, Mother, Mom, I don't think that my grandpa went to pay his insurance. She was saying to her mother. Mrs. Latter, he went out. Mrs. Latter was saying, he went out. Then Victoria, yes, but he did not go into the town. She says to her mom, no mom, he did not go into the town. Yes, he went out. Yes, I too know that. But he did not go into the town. He met old Mr. Tattersall down the street. And they went off past St. Philip's Church. She was saying that he went to church with his friend, Mrs. Latter. To the ring, oh bells, I will be bound. She was saying that church name is Ring o' Bells. So actually here in this story, so they were talking about that Elizabeth, their fathers about departed. So they were thinking that their father was departed. So Mrs. Latter and Elizabeth, actually Mrs. Latter, who is she? Actually she is Amelia. So here is the character Amelia. So here, look at here. Somewhere we had gone through this word Amelia. Look at here. Once again, I'm going to repeat the topic. Look at here. Mrs. Amelia Slater. She is Meriwether's daughter. Amelia's sister Elizabeth. So Mrs. Slater, Mrs. Jordan. Okay, these two names they were discussing. We had gone through these two names. So these two are, both of them are sisters. Okay. Next, Henry, that is Amelia's husband name. Ben Jordan, Elizabeth husband. Victoria, she is daughter of Amelia and Henry Slater. Okay, so here in this story they were talking about their father Meriwether's got departed. Okay, so they were thinking, the family members were thinking, they were thinking to take off. They want to take their father's property or something, whatever else is there in that room, this Mary's Weather's room, whatever stuff he had in his room, so they want to take that. So they were talking about that property and they were talking that, okay, we will, because Meriwether, he stays in the upstairs. So they want to go upstairs to see whatever that stuff, things are there. So here actually Victoria was saying to her mother, no mama, okay, grandpapa went out, but he went to church. So actually they thought that morning that their father, that is Mrs. Slater's and Elizabeth's father, had gone to have a premium, that is about that insurance, to pay insurance. They were thinking in that way, but Victoria was saying, no, he went to church. Ring all bells. Okay? Next. Look at here. Now, Ben. The ring o' bells. Mrs. Slater. That public house that John Sherlock's widow keeps. Actually, she's lady. Okay. Mrs. Slater, she was saying about this widow. He's always hanging about there. Her. Oh, look at here. If he has not paid it, Ben, do you think he has not paid it? Was it overdue? So they were talking about insurance payment. Mrs. Jordan, something tells me he has not paid it. I have a warning. I know it. He's not paid it. Mrs. Jordan was saying, yes, our father, I know it. He has not paid it. Ben, the drunken old beggar. Ben was saying, the drunken old beggar. He was saying in that way. Mrs. Jordan, he's done it on purpose, just to annoying us. What is that? She was saying that just he has done it on purpose so that we want to get angry. Mrs. Slater, after all I have done for him, having to put up with him in the house these 3 years, it's nothing short of swindling. So, 3 years, Mrs. Slater. So, her father was staying with her for past 3 years. Mrs. Jordan, I had to put up with him for 5 years. He was saying, Mrs. Jordan, I had to put up with him for 5 years. Mrs. Slater, and we were trying to turn him over to us all the time. So it's a talk between both sisters. They were talking about their father, Henry, but we don't know for certain that he is not paid the premium. So Henry was saying, we don't know about that premium matter. Mrs. Jordan, I do. It's come over me all at once that he has not. Mrs. Jordan was saying, I got a information. It's come over me all at once that he has not. She was saying that I had got information at once about this premium. So he did not pay it. Mrs. Jordan was saying that further he did not pay it. What is that? Insurance. Money. Mrs. Slater, Victoria, run upstairs and fetch that bunch of keys that's on your grandpa's dressing table. Okay, Mrs. Slater was saying to Victoria, go to upstairs, run upstairs and fetch that bunch of keys. Okay, bring that keys which was on your grandfather's dressing table. Victoria in grandpa's room. Mrs. Slater, yes. Victoria, so Victoria was saying, yes, our grandpa's room. Yes, mom. Then Mrs. Slater, yes. Go to your grandpa's room. Victoria, I don't like to. She was saying, I don't like to. Go over there. Mrs. Slater, don't talk too silly. There is no one can hurt you. She was saying, there is no one can hurt you. Go upstairs. She was saying to her daughter Victoria. Victoria was saying, we will see if he is locked the receipt up in the bureau. So she was saying, go and bring the keys, whatever the keys on the table, so that we can see the receipt of this premium, that is insurance receipts in the bureau, that is in his drawing table. So Mrs. Slater was saying to Victoria, go upstairs and bring your grandfather's keys, whatever the keys he had on the table, so that we are going to see the receipt of the insurance, premium insurance, that is insurance money receipts. That is about paid bills receipt. Ben, in where in this thing? He rises and examines it. Mrs. Jordan, also rising. She was saying, both were talking loudly. I like it. It's artistic. Did you buy it at any auction? And it Anne. Henry. Hey, where did I buy it, Amelia? Henry was saying to his wife, Amelia. Mrs. Slater, yes. At an auction. Mrs. Slater was saying, yes. Ben, Oh, second hand. Mrs. Jordan, don't show your ignorance. Ben, all artistic things are second hand. Look at those old masters. Victoria returns, very scared. She closes the door after her. So, look at here, Victoria. She returns, very scared. Victoria, she was rushing. Mother, mother, mom, mom, mom. Mrs. Latters. What is it, child? Yes, she was surprised. Victoria, Grandpa's getting up. Victoria was saying, Mom, Grandpa's getting up. She was shouted. She's rushing like anything. She was scared and she was running to her mother. Mom, mom, mom. Okay? Grandpa's getting up. Ben. What? Mrs. Latter. What do you say? So, everybody are shocked. Okay, Ben, Henry, Mrs. Jordan, everyone, Mrs. Latter. So, Victoria was saying that, yes, Grandpa, about Grandpa. Yes, he was getting up. Mrs. Latter, what do you say? Victoria, Grandpa's getting up. Mrs. Jordan, that's child's crazy. Mrs. Jordan was saying, that's child's crazy. Mrs. Slatter, don't talk too silly. Don't you know your grandpa's dead? Mrs. Slatter was saying, don't talk so silly. Mrs. Slatter was saying, don't talk silly. Do you know your grandpa's dead? Victoria, no, he's getting up. I saw him. Victoria, actually she went upstairs, so she saw. And she was saying, whatever she was saying is exactly correct. But they were surprised because they thought that their father, was departed. But as soon as Victoria went into the upstairs room, that is grandpa's room, she came to know that he is getting up. I saw him. They are transfixed with amazement. Ben and Mrs. Jordan left off table. Victoria clings to Mrs. Latter, right of table, Henry near fireplaces. So look at here. Something they were so surprised. Okay? Mrs. Jordan, you would better go up and see for yourself, Amelia. Mrs. Jordan was saying to Amelia, go sister, go upstairs. Look at there in that room. You go and see go to our father's room and see whether he is getting up. Next, Mrs. Latter, here, come with me, Henry. She was saying to her husband, okay, we will go. Come with me, Henry. Ben, suddenly, hist, listen. They look at the door. A slight chuckling is heard outside. The door opens, revealing an old man clad in a faded but gay dressing gown. He is in his stockinged feet. Although over 70, he is vigorous and well-colored. His brightly malicious eye twinkle under his heavy reddish-grey eyebrows. He is obviously the grandfather. Merryweather, or else his ghost. So they were surprised somebody coming from door. That is, he is vigorous and well-colored. So they were thinking, is it grandfather Meriwether or else his ghost? They were thinking. Okay. Actually, in this story, the day departed. Page number 60. In this lesson, written by Stanley Horton, he was talking about someone, our beloved one, if he had got departed. So definitely we are going to have lot of grief, sorrow. So apart from our tears, even he was saying that here in this story, they were thinking about the property, that is money, that is property of that person's. They wanna have a share in that property. So they were thinking about that, and they thought that actually this Amelia and Elizabeth both and Henry Jordan, they thought that this person, this old person, Meriwether, this person was departed, so they wanna have a property of that Meriwethers. So they were talking about that, but they came to know that okay, this their father Meriwether's, actually he was not God departed. Okay, he went to church. Look at here. Look at here. The story is about, look at here. Falling, Mr. Meriwether reveals he had a slight headache and asks Mrs. Jordan why she is visiting and why she and Ben are dressed as though in mourning. Both daughters try to cover up the truth. So look at here. Meriwether reveals he had slight headache. Actually, he was saying that he had a slight headache. And asked Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth. He was asking her daughter, why you people dressed as though in mourning? That is, in that dress, if someone got departed, they are going to wear such type of dress. So he was asking to her daughter. Both daughters try to cover up the truth. They want to cover up the truth. Mrs. Meriwether asked Mrs. Slater why his bureau is downstairs. He was asking to Mrs. Slater why my bureau is downstairs and why Henry is wearing his slipper. He was asking why Henry was wearing my slipper, leading to Mrs. Jordan understand the situations and promises to change his will so that all his money and possessions will go to the daughter in whose house he passes away. So, look at here. Mrs. Jordan, Mrs. Jordan and Ben accusing Mrs. Slater and Henry of stealing from family. Mr. Here, look at here. Mr. Meriwether possessions will go to the daughter in whose house he passes away. So they were saying who Ben and Mrs. Jordan, they were talking that so that Mr. Meriwether's property, everything is going, it may go to it, that their father's money will go to that Mrs. Slater's daughter, in the name of Mrs. Slater's daughter, because Mr. Meriwether was staying in the Mrs. Slater's daughter's house, not in Mrs. Jordan's house. So Ben and Mrs. Jordan, that is Elizabeth and Elizabeth's husband, both were talking that this old person was staying in Mrs. Slater's house. So his property is going to going to give to my sister, Mrs. Slater. She was thinking in that way. This prompts a massive argument between Mrs. Slater and Mrs. George. Both sisters were talking about this property and they had a massive argument, which only ends when Mr. Merriweather announces that he will be marrying Mrs. Shorrocks at the Ringo Bells. He was saying, I will marry this old lady, she's widow, and that at last he would find someone happy to live with him. So he was saying, because they were very much busy and have a massive argument about the property. So at last he revealed that he wanna marry this old lady at the Ringo Bells. Okay. So here grandfather, that is Mr. Merriweather, he was not departed. They thought that he was departed actually, but he did not. And he wanna marry this older lady, widow lady. So actually the story is about a argument of the property, that Merriweather's property, about that properties. Okay, they had a massive argument between Mrs. Slater and Mrs. Jordan. Both sisters were fighting about this their father's money, property. So this is about story lessons. The deed departed.